They left me standing at gate 12 with a one-way ticket, a single duffel bag, and 50 crumpled dollars in my pocket, like I was baggage they'd forgotten to claim. I'm Samuel Whitaker, 72 years old, Navy corpsman, railroad foreman, and a man who's fixed more broken rails than most people have broken promises. My son Ethan and his wife Maddie thought they were done with me when they drove off from that airport laughing. They thought the deed I'd signed put everything I owned, my house, my pension, my life's work, into their greedy hands. What they never realized is that the paper they bragged about was their own trap, written by the very man they tried to bury. Before we roll the story back to where it all began, subscribe to the channel, tap the bell icon, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because this isn't just revenge. It's reclamation. When my wife Eleanor passed away from pancreatic cancer, the silence in our home felt heavier than any freight train I'd ever worked under. I couldn't stand the quiet hum of the refrigerator or the echo of my own footsteps in that hallway where her laughter used to live. So, when my son Ethan called and said, "Dad, come stay with us in Springfield for a while, just until you get back on your feet," I didn't think twice. I packed a single duffel, grabbed Eleanor's folded flag from her service, and drove 3 hours north. Ethan met me at the door with that firm salesman's smile he used to wear back in high school when he sold chocolate bars for the band. His wife Maddie followed with her phone already in hand, camera facing outward. "You look tired, Sam," she said, half sympathetic, half disgusted. "We'll take care of everything now. You just relax." For the first few weeks, it almost felt like family again. Ethan made coffee in the mornings, Maddie set a plate at the table, and I tried not to notice that mine was the only one made of plastic while theirs gleamed with polished china. "Less to wash," she said with a smile that never reached her eyes. I told myself it was kindness. I told myself they were just being careful. But kindness doesn't come with whispered conversations behind closed doors or the sound of your own name followed by sighs. The first real sign of trouble came with the bills. Ethan sat beside me one evening, scrolling through my laptop. "Dad, let me automate all this for you," he said. "It's easier these days, paperless, autopay, direct deposit. You don't need to stress over due dates." I trusted him. After all, I'd spent 40 years trusting steel rails to hold when everything else shook. So I signed a few digital forms, giving him limited access to manage my utility payments. Or so I thought. From there, the small humiliations crept in like rust. One night I came upstairs late to find my dinner waiting, cold meatloaf on a paper plate, covered in plastic wrap. Ethan and Maddie were finishing dessert at the dining table, their laughter fading when I entered. "We thought you'd already eaten, Dad," Maddie said, glancing at Ethan. He didn't meet my eyes. I sat at the counter and chewed quietly while they stacked their plates in the dishwasher. The next night, my seat was moved to the small breakfast nook near the pantry. "More comfortable," Maddie claimed. I told myself again, kindness. But the words started to taste bitter. Then came the camera. The first time I noticed, it was subtle. Maddie's phone tilted slightly as I reached for my pill organizer. "Just recording for the doctor," she said quickly when I asked. "You know, in case your medication needs adjusting." I nodded, embarrassed. My hand trembled slightly as I swallowed the pill. That tremor wasn't fear, it was caffeine. I'd had 3 cups of coffee trying to stay awake after another night of hearing them whisper about refinancing. But to a phone camera, a shaking hand looks like evidence. By the end of that month, I heard the phrase, caregiver burnout, more times than I'd ever heard. "I love you." At church, Maddie played the part perfectly. She'd link arms with me, guide me slowly down the steps, and tell anyone who'd listen. "He's doing better, but it's hard, you know? He forgets things." The truth was, I hadn't forgotten a thing. I remembered every sideways look, every staged act of sympathy, every whisper about how long I might still manage on my own. They started curating my decline. Ethan created a shared album titled Dad's Journey, filled with pictures of me sitting quietly in the backyard, looking lost. Maddie posted them on her Facebook with captions like, "Taking care of aging family isn't easy, but love makes it worth it." The comments flooded in. "You're both saints. So inspiring." And I could almost hear Ethan's self-satisfied breath when he scrolled through them at night. Meanwhile, my money began to move. I'd notice unfamiliar withdrawals, $300 here, $900 there, always rounded, always neat. One payment to a luxury auto service, another to a home improvement contractor I'd never met. When I asked, Ethan chuckled. "Dad, relax. I'm just reorganizing some accounts. You'll thank me when tax season hits." That night, I made my first entry in a small spiral notebook. February 17 to 9:45 p.m. Ethan said he's reorganizing accounts. $918 withdrawal. Smiled too easily. I kept writing. Each night after they went to bed, I'd sit in that little nook and jot down what I saw, what I heard. I'd learned long ago that details win wars. Then came the mailbox change. "Dad, the HOA doesn't want you walking out there alone," Maddie said one afternoon, holding a stack of envelopes I hadn't seen in days. "We'll just collect your mail for you, okay?" I agreed the first time. By the second week, I realized half of it never reached me. My VA statements, my railroad pension updates, even a letter from Dr. Karen Doyle, all vanished into Maddie's safekeeping. When I called Dr. Doyle's office myself, the nurse hesitated. "Mr. Whitaker, we've mailed several updates to your home. Haven't you received them?" "No, ma'am," I said quietly. "But from now on, you can send them directly to my work locker at the depot. I'll pick them up myself." It was then I started to observe differently. Marines have tactics, but so do railroad men. We learn to hear the faintest rattle before the whole line collapses. I began listening not to their words but to their timing, their tones, the way Ethan's laughter changed when money came up. When I asked about my credit union statement, Ethan's eyes darted. "Oh, that old account? We closed it, consolidated everything. Less confusion." I didn't argue. Instead, I visited Ozark Valley Credit Union the next morning. The clerk, a young woman named Ava Brooks, looked up my account and frowned. "Mr. Whitaker, nothing's been closed. But someone tried to add a joint signer 2 weeks ago." My stomach tightened. "Who?" "Ethan Whitaker." "Was it approved?" "Not without your signature." She smiled faintly. "And we know your signature." That day, I added Ava to the short list of people I trusted, alongside my late wife and the flag folded in my duffel. When I returned home, Maddie greeted me with exaggerated cheer. "Where've you been, Dad?" "Downtown," I said. "Had some rails to check." She laughed lightly. "Always working, huh?" I smiled back, but inside something in me clicked, an old rhythm, the same one I'd felt crawling through tunnels in Da Nang half a century ago. Patience. Observation. Timing. That night, I lay awake listening to the quiet hum of the house. Ethan's voice drifted down the hall. "Once the paperwork's in our name, we can refinance." Maddie whispered something I couldn't catch, followed by the soft sound of laughter. In that moment, grief hardened into purpose. They thought I was an old man clinging to memories. They thought loneliness made me weak. But they'd forgotten what men like me learn early: never mistake quiet for surrender. So, I began to prepare. I bought a small digital recorder at a pawn shop off Main Street, cash only, no trace. I tested it that night while the TV played upstairs. It caught every word, every scrape of a chair, every condescending sigh. By spring, my notebook was half full, my phone had pictures of every bill, and my recorder held hours of their casual cruelty. On March 9th, Maddie posted another picture of me on her page, me kneeling to tie my shoe, captioned, "He forgets sometimes." That same evening, I recorded her saying, "Once the deed's switched, we'll finally get that pool." I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I simply wrote the date, the time, and the line. That's the thing about betrayal. It's loud at first, then it gets quiet when people start thinking they've already won. And as I sat there under the soft yellow kitchen light, the pen scratching against the paper, I made myself a promise. If they want my house so badly, they can have the deed. But not the way they think. Because in war, and in family, you sometimes let the other side step forward, just far enough to fall into their own hole. That night was the last time I apologized for anything. From that point on, I wasn't a grieving father anymore. I was a man laying track toward their downfall, one quiet mile at a time. By early May, I had almost 3 months of notes, recordings, and screenshots tucked away in a battered black notebook that used to hold my railroad schedules. Every page was proof that my son and his wife weren't caretakers. They were contractors of greed, waiting for one final signature. Ethan had grown bolder, too. He stopped hiding his irritation when I asked questions about my finances. "Dad, you don't need to understand all this," he'd say with that same salesman's grin. "You've done enough. Let us handle things." Handle things. Those 2 words always made my stomach turn. One evening over dinner, he cleared his throat like a man preparing for a pitch. "Dad, you've been cooped up too long. You need a change of scenery. How about a little trip? Sunshine, rest, no stress." Maddie smiled over her wine glass. "We already booked it. Flight leaves Monday. Just pack light. A trip." I should have known. Monday morning, they drove me to Springfield National Airport. I wore my navy jacket, the one with Eleanor's initials embroidered inside, and carried my duffel. Ethan handed me a printed itinerary and a folded envelope. "There's a little spending money in there," he said. "We'll take care of everything back home. You just relax." I opened it. $50. "Where exactly am I going?" I asked. "Phoenix," Maddie said brightly. "You love the desert." I'd never been to Arizona in my life. The loudspeaker announced boarding for Flight 1183, Phoenix bound. I looked from the ticket to their faces, and for the first time, I saw it clearly: relief. Relief that they were about to be rid of me. Ethan clapped me on the shoulder, already turning away. "You take care now, Dad. We'll check in once you're settled." They walked off hand in hand, laughing. I stood there by gate 12, surrounded by travelers rushing to their gates, wondering how 2 people I'd raised and helped could toss me aside like lost luggage. But self-pity is a luxury Marines and railroad men can't afford. I sat down, opened my old flip phone, and called Ava Brooks at Ozark Valley Credit Union. "Ava," I said quietly, "something's wrong. I think my son just tried to move me out of the picture." Her tone sharpened. "Do you want me to check your accounts again?" "Yes, ma'am. And run the last 60 days. While she worked, I opened Ethan's gift envelope again. The $50 looked pitiful in the palm of my hand, 2 20s and a 10, like a tip for good behavior. Ava came back on the line. "Mr. Whitaker, I'm seeing new transfer requests pending, 2 of them, to a Whitaker Family Holdings LLC. Are you familiar with that?" I wasn't. "And here's the kicker," she continued. "Both requests list your home address as collateral for an unsecured loan." That was it. The trip wasn't a vacation. It was a displacement. They wanted me out of state long enough to file their papers without interference. "Can you freeze those transfers?" I asked. "Yes, but only with written authorization. Send the forms to my email. I'll sign and return them before this flight even leaves the ground." I hung up, printed the forms at the airport kiosk, signed them with a shaking hand, and scanned them right back. By the time boarding was called, Ava had frozen both accounts. I didn't board that plane. Instead, I used the last of my change to buy a coffee and watched Flight 1183 disappear into the clouds, empty seat 24C reserved for a man they thought they'd erased. 2 hours later, I took an Uber home. When I arrived, Ethan's truck was gone. The driveway felt colder than the November nights Eleanor and I used to stand out there, counting trains in the distance. I unlocked the front door quietly. Inside, the living room looked stripped, photo frames gone, drawers slightly open. My heart clenched, but not from sadness. From confirmation. I went straight to my small desk in the basement and opened the lockbox, Eleanor's old steel one with the word "Forever" etched under the latch. Inside were the documents that mattered. The true deed to the Whitaker home, filed months ago under a living trust that listed me as sole occupant for life. A notarized conduct clause, crafted with Loretta McKay's help, stating that any heir who committed fraud, abuse, or financial exploitation forfeited all claim. My VA evaluation: no cognitive decline, no impairment. A copy of Ethan's fake quitclaim draft Maddie had slipped into my mail weeks before. Eleanor always said paper doesn't lie, people do. And now, I had paper enough to bury their lies 10 feet deep. The next morning, I called Loretta. "You were right," I told her. "They made their move." She didn't sound surprised. "Then it's time you make yours. I'll prepare a statement of facts and attach the conduct clause. Just keep them talking until the 4th. The 4th? Founders' Day celebration. You're on the program as the Railman of the Year, remember? Whole town LLB there." I could almost hear her smile. Perfect stage. That week, I began reconnaissance. The paperwork from Ethan's family holdings company had been emailed to him from a corporate address downtown. I waited until he left his laptop open one evening. Habit dies hard for careless men. A quick photo of the screen showed their full plan: refinance the house, list it under their LLC, declare me mentally incompetent, and move to Florida within 6 months. Every step laid out like blueprints for betrayal. That night, I sat in my room listening to the faint hum of the train tracks beyond our backyard. Every whistle reminded me that steel bends before it breaks, and so would I. Over the next few days, the town started buzzing with whispers. At church, Maddie told the ladies' circle I'd wandered off at the airport and forgot where I lived. The story spread fast. One cashier at the local diner asked gently, "Mr. Whitaker, are you okay? I heard you had a spell." I smiled. Never better. But inside, a different kind of steel was forming. Ethan and Maddie thought isolation would make me desperate. It made me dangerous. They thought a forged deed could bury me. I'd already buried my signature under layers of legal protection they couldn't comprehend. Still, I played the part. I shuffled slower. I asked harmless questions. I let Maddie film me refilling my pillbox and Ethan brag about Dad's retirement plan. Every recording, every word, every date went into my growing archive. Late one evening, while they argued in the kitchen about when to file, I sat on the porch and whispered to myself, "You'll hang yourselves with your own paperwork." By the end of that week, Ava had confirmed the bank's fraud investigation was underway. Loretta had reviewed the trust deed and confirmed it was legally bulletproof. And the town's Founders' Day committee had finalized the program with my name in bold as the man of honor. The pieces were all in place. From the outside, I looked like a tired old man waiting for another disappointment. Inside, I was a ticking clock wired with precision. The only thing left to do now was let them think they'd already won. Because sometimes revenge doesn't come with fists or fury, it comes with filing dates and fine print. And when July 4th arrived, that's exactly what I'd use to turn their victory into their worst nightmare. When you've spent a life reading blueprints and title sheets, you learn to spot a weak link a mile away. That habit saved my hide. A few nights after the airport stunt, I met Loretta McKay at the little diner on Main, booth in the back, the one we always used to sit in when Eleanor wanted pie after choir practice. Loretta's hands were steady like a judge's should be. Years on the bench had smoothed out the tremor most old people get. She slid a thick envelope across the table without a word, and I felt my throat go dry. "What do you want me to see?" I asked. She didn't smile. "Open it, Sam." Inside were copies of every important paper I'd tucked away over the years, some originals, some photocopies, and a few things they thought I wouldn't notice. The first card pulled my eyes, a quitclaim draft with Ethan's name typed as grantee, one signature line, and a notary stamp so fresh it gleamed like it had been printed that morning. The margin had a scribbled phone number and the words, "Office Max Notary," in a woman's handwriting. "Sloppy," Loretta said. "No second witness. Not the right language. And that notary, Office Max stamps are fine for convenience, but the document itself is missing required verbiage for this county. Someone did it in a hurry. She reached for another file and placed it beside the quitclaim, a certified copy of the Whitaker Living Trust, recorded in the county recorder's office 3 months earlier, long before Ethan started acting like he owned the law firm. You filed this? I asked. Loretta nodded. You did quietly. Smart move. This trust contains an occupancy provision that keeps you in the house for life. More importantly, it has a conduct clause, plain English, Sam. It says if a named heir engages in financial exploitation, elder abuse, or fraud, their remainder interest is void and the residuary passes to a named charity. You put teeth in it. Not many people think to put a conduct clause in a living trust, but you did. That's why you called me to notarize it. I'd remembered the night. Loretta had come over after supper, cup of tea in hand, and we'd gone over the language until Eleanor, God rest her, had nodded and said, Make sure our kids can't eat this house like a pack of stray dogs. We'd laughed then, but neither of us believed it would matter. I'd filed the trust because it seemed sensible, insurance against family mishaps, nothing more. Now it was a weapon. Loretta flipped the page and pointed. Look here. The trust was recorded prior to any quitclaim or attempted transfer. In property law, priority matters. Recorded first wins. Also, your trust includes a no-waste covenant. If an heir uses the property or the estate assets for personal enrichment at the expense of the settler, that's a breach. Combine that with a bank's compliance letter showing exploitation, and you've got a trigger event. I tasted the copper of surprise and something else. Relief that didn't feel like weakness. So their papers are useless? Not useless, Loretta said. But they're decorative. They don't trump a recorded trust with a conditional clause. What they are, though, is evidence of intent, which helps us prove malice. We went through the quitclaim under the diner's yellow light. Ethan's witness line was blank. The notary stamp had a name but no commission number. It had the same smudge blue ink as a promotional stamp you get when someone signs a receipt. Small mistakes, except mistakes tell stories. Someone rushed this. Someone wanted speed over accuracy. You set the trap easily, Sam, Loretta said. You gave these two the illusion of ownership. You made them act. Now we document those acts, and the law will do what it's supposed to do. Later that night I sat at my kitchen table with the trust document laid out like a map. The conduct clause read in plain, stubborn language, if any beneficiary is found to have financially exploited the settler, through unauthorized withdrawals, forging signatures, or isolating the settler to obtain a signature, then that beneficiary's remainder is forfeit and the assets go to the Springfield Veterans Housing Fund. I'd chosen that fund because it mattered to me. Eleanor always wanted our money to help veterans, not feed a selfish son's lifestyle. It felt vindictive and proper all at once. The clause wasn't a ruse, it was a test. If someone treated you like property, the property should not reward them. After Loretta, I met Ava Brooks at the credit union. She'd already pulled the transaction history I'd asked for and printed it out without complaint. Ava laid the pages in a neat stack, the little blue printer humming like a tiny locomotive. See here, she said, tapping a line. 2 withdrawals to Whitaker Family Holdings LLC, $21,000 on April 29th and $18,000 on May 3rd. Several charges to a high-end car service and a luxury department store, pattern fits exploitation. Ava's face hardened. If you want to trigger this formally, we'll need sworn statements from witnesses and a bank compliance letter stating there is a pattern of exploitation. The bank can issue that to law enforcement if they find probable cause. I wrote it down. 1. Witness statements. 2. Bank compliance letter. 3. Notarized trust copy. 4. Dr. Doyle's medical summary. The plan began to feel concrete. The tricky bit was public perception. Ethan had been whispering Dad's memory into the town's ear for weeks. Rumors spread faster than truth on a summer wind, and I couldn't rely on whispers to save me. I needed daylight, a public reveal where the town's eyes would see the facts and the law would be on my side. Loretta rubbed her chin thoughtfully. You should let them keep pretending until they show complete intent. Make them feel safe enough to make their move. Once the offending actions are well documented and the bank confirms a pattern, we file. The conduct clause triggers. The trust does its work. I pictured Ethan and Maddie in their new car, imagining their name on a mailbox. I imagined the smug look Ethan gave when he thought the house was his. I thought of Eleanor's hands folding clothes, quiet and careful, and I felt that old promise again, not to let their greed desecrate what we built. Will they fight it? I asked. They'll try, Loretta said, with the stoic patience of someone who'd seen greedy children for decades. But you planned ahead, Sam. You gave them no clean title and you left a paper trail. They can't forge the past into a present that suits them. That night I added another entry to my notebook, May 18th. Trust confirmed, recorded March 2nd. Quitclaim appears May 20th. Bank confirms suspicious transfers. Witnesses secured. Target, Founders Day. Trigger ready. I wasn't cruel. Cruelty would have been making a spectacle of them for its own sake. What I wanted was justice. The honest sort that leaves the guilty with a choice: correct what you've done, or lose everything you thought you could steal. And I had one more thing in my pocket besides papers and witness names: patience. That's how men like me win. You wait till the other side walks straight into the trap you set, and you close it quietly, without drama. The law snaps shut, the truth stands up. When the sun rose on the days to come, I felt differently walking through my yard. The house didn't feel like a liability anymore. It felt like an inheritance I'd owed to myself, and to Eleanor, not to hand over to greed. The difference between suspicion and proof is paperwork, and I'd spent a lifetime reading fine print. By June, every piece of the puzzle was ready to lock into place. All I needed was timing. I started with Ava Brooks, the compliance officer at Ozark Valley Credit Union. She was younger than my grandson would have been if life had gone differently, sharp, deliberate, and allergic to nonsense. When I met her at the branch, she already had a manila folder waiting. Mr. Whitaker, she said, sliding it across the desk. You were right. We've confirmed recurring withdrawals to Whitaker Family Holdings LLC, originating from your home Wi-Fi and Ethan's office IP. Dates line up with your reported incidents. I looked at the spreadsheet, each transaction stamped with time codes. That's the pattern you needed? More than enough, she replied. We're drafting a bank compliance letter under the state's Elder Exploitation Reporting Act. Once filed, it automatically alerts law enforcement and your trustee of record. I nodded slowly. That trustee would be me. Ava smiled. Then congratulations, Mr. Whitaker. You just gave yourself legal ammunition. That same afternoon, I drove to Dr. Karen Doyle's office at the VA clinic. She'd been treating me for a decade, and she looked up from my chart with a mixture of concern and recognition. I figured you'd be in soon, she said. How's the stress level? About to drop by half, I said, handing her the situation in shorthand. Dr. Doyle printed out a 5-year history of my evaluations, every page stating no cognitive decline, anxiety well controlled, independent in activities of daily living. She even signed and stamped the final page herself. You've been consistent since 2018, Sam. If anyone says otherwise, show them this. I smiled. Doctor's orders? She returned the smile. Doctor's evidence. The next step was witnesses. I visited Ben Ralston, the usher from church who'd overheard Maddie whisper, "Once the deed's in our name, we're done babysitting." He was sanding a bench in his garage when I arrived. Ben, I said quietly, remember that thing you heard at the Easter potluck? He nodded immediately. You need me to write it down? If you don't mind. He set down his sander, wiped his hands, and grabbed a notebook. The statement was simple, direct, and signed right then and there. Next was Marcia Tate, our neighbor who'd seen Ethan checking my mail more than once. He said you get confused with your bills, she told me. I thought he was being helpful. When she realized he'd been intercepting my pension letters, her expression hardened. You'll have my statement tonight. By the end of the week, I had 2 signed witness statements, a doctor's report, and a pending compliance letter. The foundation was solid, Now I needed to choose how to lay the tracks for the reveal. Loretta called that Friday. "You ready for your fireworks?" she asked. "Almost," I said. "How's that conduct clause holding up?" "Untouchable," she said, chuckling. "Once the compliance letter drops, the clause activates automatically. Ethan and Maddie will forfeit any claim the moment a report of financial exploitation is filed." "And we're certain the clause is recorded?" "I checked myself this morning." "You're ironclad." Loretta paused, then added, "You know what day that letter will be dated?" "What day?" "July 4th. I laughed for the first time in months. "Seems fitting. Independence Day." While paperwork moved behind the scenes, Ethan and Maddie were busy tightening their own noose. They'd started talking openly about refinancing the house. Maddie even bragged at church. "We're modernizing Dad's place, new roof, new pool." Each lie they told became another nail in their coffin. I didn't interrupt. I just smiled, nodded, and recorded it later that night in my notebook. June 22nd, Maddie at church. "Once the house paperwork clears, we can move forward with the pool." June 23rd, Ethan told the pastor dads. "Struggling more each day." Pastor looked uncomfortable. June 24th, bank confirmed letter finalized. Loretta preparing notarized packet. Countdown, 10 days. Every line felt like laying new track, one section closer to the junction where everything would collide. 3 days before the celebration, Ava called. "Mr. Whitaker, the compliance letter is ready. Want me to email it or hand it over in person?" "In person," I said. "I'd like to see it printed." She met me at the branch's small conference room. The letterhead read Ozark Valley Credit Union, Compliance Division. The first line. "Pursuant to State Code Section 46B, our institution has identified a pattern consistent with financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, Samuel Whitaker." It listed the dates, the transfers, and Ethan's IP addresses. Ava slid it into a blue envelope embossed with the credit union's seal. "This goes to law enforcement, your trustee, and any notary of record associated with your trust." "That would be Loretta McKay," I said. Ava smiled knowingly. "Then it's in good hands." That evening, I visited Loretta one last time before the 4th. Her office smelled of lemon polish and old books. She placed the compliance letter beside the trust deed, aligning the edges like a judge aligning exhibits. "Here it is," she said softly. "The moment the town hears this read aloud, the clause triggers. Ethan's inheritance dissolves automatically. The Veterans Housing Fund becomes your residuary beneficiary. He can't reverse it." "Then we're ready," I said. Loretta looked up. "You sure you want to do this publicly? Could still handle it quiet." "No," I said. "They built this lie in front of neighbors, friends, church. The truth deserves the same sunlight." She nodded. "Then I'll see you on the 4th. The night before the celebration, I walked through the house with my recorder in hand. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the air conditioner felt different, not like traps closing in, but like walls finally siding with me again. On the kitchen counter lay my evidence file, stacked and labeled. Dr. Doyle, VA evaluation. Ava Brooks, compliance letter. Witness statements, Ralston, Tate. Trust deed, recorded March 2nd. Quitclaim copy, unrecorded May 20th. Atop the pile, a folded American flag, Eleanor's flag, polished edges, corners sharp as memory. I whispered. "Tomorrow, honey, they find out what paper can do." Outside, fireworks from a neighboring town cracked faintly in the distance, rehearsals for the coming holiday. Morning came with July heat thick enough to warp rail steel. I ironed my best shirt, pinned my corpsman badge over my pocket, and packed the file into my briefcase. Ethan and Maddie were already up when I stepped into the kitchen. Maddie wore a red, white, and blue sundress. Ethan had his sleeves rolled and his salesman's smile ready. "Morning, Dad," he said cheerfully. "Big day for you. The committee's excited." "So am I said, careful to keep my voice light. He reached for my briefcase. "Need me to carry that?" "No, son," I said. I've got it handled. Maddie kissed my cheek perfunctorily. We're so proud of you, Dad. Springfield's Rail Man of the Year. I smiled. Let's hope I do the title justice. As we headed out to the car, the irony of her words settled in. They thought they were escorting a helpless old man to his final ceremony of gratitude. In truth, they were driving their own inheritance to the gallows. The stage was set, the witnesses were ready, and the paperwork, quiet, merciless, undeniable, waited for daylight. Tomorrow, they'd call it a celebration. I'd call it Reckoning Day. If you've ever lived in a small town, you know gossip doesn't walk, it runs in Sunday's shoes. By the end of June, Ethan and Maddie weren't just whispering behind closed doors anymore. They were narrating my downfall to anyone who'd listen. It started at the church fundraiser. St. Matthew's was holding its annual pie and pantry sale, and Maddie had practically taken over the dessert table. She wore that practiced smile she used for social media, the kind that looked generous until you noticed how sharp her eyes were. Ethan and I have been so blessed, she told the crowd as I helped stack folding chairs nearby. But it's been a lot lately. You know, caring for Dad, watching him decline. The words slid out like honey mixed with vinegar. People stopped chewing. She sighed softly. He forgets where he puts things now. Sometimes he gets confused and lashes out. We love him, but it's hard. Heads nodded. Someone touched her shoulder. You're a saint, Maddie. I looked up from my stack of chairs, caught her glance, and for a heartbeat, her mask slipped. A smirk. Quick but real. I didn't confront her. I just smiled back, slow and polite, because there's nothing more dangerous than a man who's listening. That night, her words appeared on Facebook. Please pray for an elderly family member who's losing touch with reality. It's heartbreaking, but love gives us strength. Within hours, the post had 200 likes and a flood of comments. Sending prayers. You're both angels. Caregiving is so hard. No one mentioned my name, but everyone knew who she meant. In towns like ours, anonymity is a paper-thin curtain. When I saw the post, I didn't get angry. I took screenshots, every comment, every timestamp. Evidence doesn't shout, it just waits its turn. The next morning, I stopped by Ava's office and showed her the screenshots. Public narrative control, she said flatly. Common in exploitation cases. They smear first so no one believes the victim later. I nodded. They'll believe soon enough. That weekend, Ben Ralston, the church usher, pulled me aside after Sunday service. His voice was low, conspiratorial. Sam, you good? Folks are talking. Maddie said you wandered off at the airport, that you got lost and scared TSA half to death. I almost laughed. That's one way to tell it. Ben looked uncomfortable. You want me to do anything? Yes, I said. Be there on the 4th. Bring your phone. Record what you see. He nodded. Done. Meanwhile, Ethan had started playing the concerned son role to perfection. At the diner, he made sure to guide me by the elbow when people were watching. Careful, Dad, steps uneven, he'd say loudly. You okay remembering your meds today? Every act was a seed planted for the story they were building. And the cruelest part was, people believed it. At least until Loretta McKay stepped in. She called me on the evening of June 28th. I saw that post Maddie wrote, she said. Half the congregation's sharing it. I know. Good. Let them. It'll make the reveal sting worse. Loretta's tone turned crisp. I spoke to Deputy Mercer. He'll be at the Founders' Day event, just as we planned. He'll take formal possession of the compliance packet once it's presented publicly. The moment he does, the conduct clause activates. You sure? I asked. I wrote the clause myself, Sam. It's ironclad. Over the next few days, the gossip campaign escalated. Maddie hosted a family caregiving segment on the church's live stream, with Ethan nodding solemnly beside her. Sometimes you do everything right, she told the camera. And it still feels like you're losing them. She even dabbed her eyes with a tissue for good measure. I almost admired the performance. Almost. That same evening, she cornered me in the kitchen. Dad, we're meeting with the loan officer again next week. We just need your signature to speed things up. It's nothing big. I stirred my coffee. Nothing big, huh? Her smile tightened. You trust us, don't you? I took a sip, watching her over the rim. Trust is earned, Maddie. Not notarized. The look she gave me could have cut through drywall. She turned sharply and stormed off, her heels clacking down the hall. The next day, I received an envelope from Ava, thick, stamped, and official. Inside was the finalized compliance letter, signed by the credit union's director and copied to the county sheriff's office. Attached was a summary sheet. Pattern consistent with financial exploitation by family members. Immediate protective review recommended. I placed it in the middle of my evidence folder, right above the deed. 2 more days until Founders' Day. The town buzzed with anticipation. Posters hung from lampposts. Founders' Day celebration! July 4th, fireworks, food, and Springfield's own Railman of the Year. I hadn't been called a hero in a long time. It made me nervous. Heroes stand in the light, and I'd spent years surviving in the shadows. That evening, Loretta stopped by for a final briefing. She wore a crisp blue blazer despite the heat. Here's the plan, she said, unfolding her checklist. First, Ben handles the audio and video recording from the crowd. Second, Deputy Mercer positions himself near the stage, ready to receive the documents. Third, Ava's compliance letter gets handed to him in full view of witnesses. Fourth, I'll confirm the recording date of your trust deed aloud. That's the trigger. The conduct clause activates. Their remainder interest is null. They lose everything, instantly. She looked up. Still want to go through with it, Sam? I leaned back in my chair. Loretta, they left me at an airport like I was trash. They stole from me and called it caregiving. This isn't revenge. It's restoration. She smiled faintly. Then you're ready. That night, I walked through the house one last time as it was, silent, heavy with memory. I paused by Eleanor's photo on the mantel. She was smiling in that old Kodak way, eyes full of mischief. They think they own this place, I whispered. But tomorrow, they'll learn what ownership really means. Outside, the town fireworks were already testing their timing, faint booms echoing across the valley. The air smelled of barbecue and gunpowder. In my kitchen, the light flickered as if the house itself was holding its breath. On the table lay my folder, neatly labeled. Exhibit A, Trust Deed, recorded March 2nd. Exhibit B, Compliance Letter, June 29th. Exhibit C, VA Medical Summary, Dr. Doyle. Exhibit D, Witness Statements, Ralston Tate. Exhibit E, Screenshots, Public Smear Evidence. I ran my hand over the papers like a soldier checking his rifle before battle. Each document had its place, its purpose. Tomorrow wasn't about spectacle, it was about truth in front of witnesses. The whole town would be there. The same neighbors who'd believed Maddie's tears, the same church friends who'd pitied me, the same son and daughter-in-law who'd built their empire on my silence. And when the microphone came to me, I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't rant or rage. I'd do what railroad men do best, stay on schedule. Because by noon tomorrow, Ethan and Maddie's carefully built lie would derail completely. And all it would take was a few quiet words, a blue folder, and a crowd big enough to remember every one of them. The 4th of July dawned hotter than a furnace. By 9 a.m., the streets of Springfield were already lined with lawn chairs and coolers. Kids darted between vendor tents, waving miniature flags, while the town band warmed up with an off-key version of the Stars and Stripes Forever. For most folks, Founders' Day was about barbecue and fireworks. For me, it was the end of a siege. I put on my navy blue shirt, ironed flat, with my old Navy corpsman pin shining above the pocket. The badge wasn't about pride, it was proof. Proof that I'd once served something greater than myself, and that I still could. On my table sat the blue folder with every document that mattered, the trust deed, the compliance letter, the witness statements, the screenshots of Maddie's social media smears. Ethan and Maddie came downstairs dressed like a patriotic ad. He wore a crisp white shirt with rolled sleeves, she had on a red dress with blue accents, their public uniforms. "Morning, Dad!" Ethan beamed. "Big day for you. The committee's honored." I gave a polite nod. "That's so?" "Of course," Maddie chimed in. "Everyone's so proud of you. It's not every day Springfield celebrates one of its heroes." "True," I said. "Sometimes they wait until the hero's dead." She blinked, unsure how to take that. We drove together, them up front, me in the back seat, my folder on my lap. The town square was packed by the time we arrived. A banner stretched across Main Street. "Founders Day 2024, celebrating the spirit that built our rails." Irony doesn't announce itself, but I felt it buzzing in the July air. The program moved fast. Children's choir, mayor's speech, veteran salute. Then, the MC, a cheerful radio host named Phil Barker, stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin the fireworks and festivities, we have the privilege of honoring a man whose steady hands kept our rails running safely for 3 decades. Please welcome Springfield's own Railman of the Year, Mr. Samuel Whitaker." Applause rippled across the crowd. Ethan's grin was wide enough to split his face. Maddie clapped the hardest. I climbed the short steps to the stage, my knees stiff but steady. From up there, I could see hundreds of faces, neighbors, church friends, the same folks who'd whispered about my decline. I set the folder on the podium. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady over the mic. "It's good to see the town shining today. Good to see familiar faces, some kinder than others." A few chuckles. Ethan looked slightly uncomfortable. "I've been called a lot of things in my 72 years, I continued. Foreman. Father. Husband. Lately, some new titles: forgetful, confused, incompetent." Maddie froze mid-smile. Ethan's hands gripped the back of his chair. "But truth," I said, "doesn't rattle when you test it. It stands. So I'd like to share mine." The murmuring died. 3 months ago, after my wife passed, I moved in with my son and daughter-in-law. I trusted them. And in that time, they took control of my finances, my mail, and nearly succeeded in stealing my home. Gasps. A woman in the front row whispered to her friend. Ethan stood abruptly. "Dad, please." I raised a hand. "Sit down, son. You've had your turn." The crowd shifted. Phones appeared, recording. I reached into my folder and held up the first document. "This," I said, "is my VA medical evaluation, signed by Dr. Karen Doyle. It states, and I quote, 'No cognitive decline, fully functional, independent in all activities of daily living.'" I handed it to Ben Ralston, who stood near the stage recording everything. "This next one," I said, pulling another page, "is a compliance letter from Ozark Valley Credit Union. It identifies a pattern of unauthorized withdrawals and fraudulent activity linked to Whitaker Family Holdings LLC, created by Ethan Whitaker. The letter is addressed to the county sheriff's office." The audience began murmuring louder. A few people turned toward Ethan, who was red-faced now, sweat shining under the July sun. "Mr. Whitaker," he said loudly, "you're confused, you don't understand." I looked at him calmly. "You're right, son. I didn't understand, not at first. But I do now." I pulled the trust deed from the folder, the final card. "And here," I said, "is the deed you thought you'd stolen. The one you bragged about. It's already recorded, months ago, under a living trust with a conduct clause. That means any heir who commits fraud or elder abuse forfeits their inheritance. It doesn't need a court ruling, Ethan. It activates the moment proof reaches law enforcement." I gestured toward Deputy Kyle Mercer, who was standing near the steps, already moving closer. I handed him the folder. "Deputy, that's the compliance letter and supporting evidence. Consider this my formal submission." He opened it, scanned the first page, then looked at Ethan. "Understood, Mr. Whitaker." Loretta McKay, retired judge, notary public, stepped forward from the audience, her presence commanding. "For the record," she said clearly, "the trust deed was notarized and recorded March 2nd, 2024. As of this morning, the conduct clause is active." Gasps again. Maddie half rose, trembling. "You can't do this! That house is ours!" Loretta's eyes didn't waver. "Ma'am, the law disagrees." Ethan stepped toward the stage, voice rising. "Dad, stop embarrassing yourself. We've taken care of you for months. You're just—" I leaned toward the microphone. "You're right, Ethan. You did take care of me. You took care of my money, my mail, my house, and almost got away with it." Maddie tried to grab Ethan's arm, but he shook her off. I picked up one last page, a printed screenshot of Maddie's Facebook post. "You told the town I was losing my mind," I said softly. "You called me a burden. But it's funny, isn't it? Because the only thing I ever forgot was how far greed will make people fall." The crowd began clapping, hesitantly at first, then louder. Someone shouted, "Shame on you!" Another voice added, "We believed you, Maddie." Phones filmed everything. The sound of clapping swelled, echoing across Main Street. Deputy Mercer stepped forward again. "Mr. Whitaker," he said formally, "for your safety, I'm issuing an immediate no-contact order pending investigation. They won't be returning to your home today." I handed Ethan a folded paper, the official notice. "You're served." He stared at it, color draining from his face. "Dad, please, we can fix this." I met his eyes. "Son, the rails don't run backward." The crowd erupted, applause, murmurs, a few shouts of agreement. The church ladies who'd once pitied me were clapping now, faces flushed with disbelief and shame for believing the wrong story. Loretta raised her voice. "For the record, under state statute, the clause is executed. The Whitaker property remains under the sole control of Mr. Samuel Whitaker, and the remainder estate reverts to the Springfield Veterans Housing Fund." Maddie covered her face. Ethan stood frozen, fists clenched. I turned back to the microphone. "This isn't vengeance," I said, voice steady. "It's accountability. I didn't build this house out of anger. I built it out of years of sweat, loyalty, and love. But loyalty has a backbone, not a leash. And today, I'm cutting mine free." The crowd rose to its feet. Applause thundered. The brass band, unsure what else to do, struck up America the Beautiful. As the music swelled, Deputy Mercer escorted Ethan and Maddie away from the square. I watched them go, two figures shrinking in the July heat, the sound of fireworks testing in the distance. Ben approached the stage, camera still rolling. "You okay, Sam?" I took a long breath. "Never better. Whole town saw what happened," he said. "No one's doubting you now." "Good," I said quietly. "Maybe they'll remember next time not to believe the loudest voice, just the honest one." The first firework cracked overhead, red, white, blue, scattering light across the square. People cheered, but I just stood there a moment longer, feeling something I hadn't in years: peace. Because justice doesn't always come in courtrooms or headlines. Sometimes it comes under an open sky, in front of everyone who ever doubted you, when truth finally catches up with the lie. And for the first time since Eleanor's passing, I looked up at that bursting sky and whispered, "We're home again, sweetheart." When the fireworks ended and the crowd thinned, Springfield didn't go back to normal, it adjusted. By dawn the next morning, my porch was stacked with casseroles and sympathy cards. Small-town remorse, I called it. Everyone wanted to make up for believing Ethan and Maddie's story. Mrs. Tate from next door knocked first. She stood there clutching a peach cobbler like it was a peace treaty. "Sam," she said, eyes wet. We didn't know. I feel sick about it." I smiled kindly. "It's all right, Marcia. You saw what they wanted you to see. I just can't believe family could do that." I shrugged. "Greed has a way of sounding like love when it wants something." She left the cobbler on my table, and within an hour, there were half a dozen more from other neighbors, apologies and pie crusts and macaroni casseroles. By noon, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. It was Deputy Mercer. "Mr. Whitaker, wanted to give you an update," he said. "We've received the compliance packet and the trust verification. The district attorney's office is preparing charges: financial exploitation, forgery, and elder fraud." "Good," I said. "And the house?" "Recorded deed shows sole ownership in your trust. They have no legal claim, sir." I thanked him, hung up, and let the quiet fill the house. The silence was different now, not heavy, but earned. 2 days later, Loretta McKay came by for coffee. She looked sharp as ever, that blue blazer buttoned despite the July heat. "You handled yourself well on that stage," she said. "Clean, factual, no theatrics. Exactly how you win the court of public opinion." I smiled. "Old habit. When the stakes are high, you don't shout, you stay on schedule." Loretta chuckled. "Rail man to the end." She placed an envelope on the table. "DA's office confirmed, Ethan and Maddie both charged. They'll likely get probation if they pay restitution, but they'll have felony records. No more mortgages, no more insurance licenses. Then justice fits the crime," I said. Loretta studied me a moment. "You planning to forgive them?" I took a long sip of coffee. "Forgiveness isn't a gift I hand out like candy. It's earned through repair. And I don't see any hammers in their hands yet." She nodded. "Fair enough." Before she left, she said something that stuck with me. "Sam, you didn't just save your house, you built a precedent. That conduct clause? I'm using it in other trusts now. You turned your pain into protection for others." When the door closed, I realized what she meant. Sometimes justice isn't just personal, it's contagious. By the end of the week, the Springfield Gazette ran the story on its front page. Local veteran exposes family fraud at Founders' Day celebration. Trust clause saves home from exploitation. The photo showed me standing at the podium, folder in hand, crowd mid-applause. The headline ran for 3 days. The editor even called. "Mr. Whitaker, would you consider writing a short column for our Sunday issue? About what you learned?" I said yes. The piece was simple, honest. If someone tries to make you feel crazy for noticing what's wrong, you're probably standing on the truth. By Monday, folks were quoting it in town. Meanwhile, Ethan and Maddie disappeared from public view. They moved into Maddie's mother's apartment across town, 2 bedrooms, no garage, no audience. The BMW got repossessed. Their social media accounts went silent. Then, one evening near sunset, my phone rang again. Unknown number. "Dad?" Ethan's voice came, quiet and strained. "It's me." I stayed silent. "I'm sorry," he said. "We went too far. I just thought we'd have more time to fix things." "Fix things?" I repeated. "You stole 3 years of my peace and called it caregiving. I know. I ruined everything. But I just wanted to hear your voice. I miss Mom. I miss you." I swallowed hard. For a second, I saw the boy he used to be, holding his mother's hand, scared of thunderstorms. "I miss who you were," I said. "But that boy's gone, son. You buried him under greed. Can you ever forgive me?" I looked out the window at the flag waving over the porch. "Forgiveness isn't free, Ethan. But you can start paying it back by doing right, helping others instead of taking from them. Until then, all communication goes through Loretta." The line went quiet, then clicked dead. Weeks passed, and the house felt alive again. I fixed the squeaky hinges, oiled the railings, and cleaned Eleanor's old garden bed. The tomatoes came back strong that summer. Ava Brooks dropped by to check on me. "You doing okay, Mr. Whitaker?" she asked. "Better than I've been in years," I said. She smiled. "You know, your case prompted the bank to start an internal education program on elder exploitation. They're calling it the Whitaker Rule." I laughed. Now that's something I never expected to be named after me. The Veterans Housing Fund reached out next. The trust clause's activation had automatically transferred a portion of the estate's remainder. They wanted to name their new initiative after Eleanor. At the ribbon cutting, they unveiled a plaque, The Eleanor Whitaker Relief Program. In honor of compassion that endures longer than greed. I stood there in the crowd, surrounded by volunteers and younger veterans who never met my wife but carried her spirit forward. It felt right. It felt like something good had been born out of the ashes. One late afternoon in August, Tony Ralston, Ben's son and a freight engineer, stopped by with his little girl, Lila. She handed me a hand-drawn card. It said, "Thank you for being brave, Mr. Sam." I crouched to her level. "You know, bravery isn't about fighting, kiddo. It's about standing still when everyone tells you to sit down." She nodded like she understood, though she probably didn't yet. Ben smiled. "Town's different now, Sam. People are more careful who they believe. You did that." I thought of Eleanor again and felt her laughter in the breeze. Autumn came early that year. The nights grew cooler, the cicadas quieted. I found myself sitting on the porch every morning with coffee, watching trains roll by in the distance. The sound wasn't lonely anymore, it was steady, like a heartbeat reminding me that some tracks still lead home. I started volunteering at the Veterans Resource Center, teaching older folks how to manage online banking and spot signs of exploitation. We printed flyers that read, "Protect what you've earned. Record what you can't prove yet." They hung those flyers in every clinic and post office in the county. The world didn't stop because of what happened, it just started noticing things it used to ignore. One evening, Loretta called. "Sam, you should check tomorrow's Gazette." "Why's that?" "You'll see." Next morning, the headline read, "State Senate Proposes Whitaker Act, Enhanced Protections for Elder Financial Abuse Victims." I laughed aloud. "Well, Eleanor," I said to her picture, "turns out your stubborn husband made some noise after all." Months later, near Christmas, I was back at church for the first time since the ordeal. The choir sang Silent Night. The lights glowed soft and gold. Maddie's mother approached quietly after service. "Ethan's been sober 6 months," she said. "He's working at the repair yard. He talks about you a lot." I nodded. "That's good. Maybe he's finally learning the trade." She hesitated. "Would you ever see him again?" "Maybe someday," I said. "When he learns the difference between guilt and growth." Spring returned, and with it came something unexpected, peace that didn't depend on winning. Because it wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about reclaiming dignity. I still kept Eleanor's photo above the mantel, next to the trust deed framed under glass. Visitors often asked why I'd display something so formal. I told them, "That paper isn't just property. It's a promise that truth can still outrun lies, even on broken rails." And for the folks watching this story now, if you've ever been made to feel small for noticing what's wrong, remember, silence doesn't protect you, it protects them. Stand your ground. Write things down. Speak when the moment comes. I lost 3 years, but I got my life back. My son lost everything, but maybe someday, he'll find his soul. So wherever you're watching from, hit subscribe, tap that bell, and tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. Because I've got more stories where this one came from, about people who thought they were powerless, until they remembered who they were. And this old railman's got a few more miles left to tell them.